So today we're talking about two of my favorite things that have helped make my life less stressful and easier to manage. So the first one of those is taking things slow. When I think about speed, especially extreme speed, I start to think about danger. That's why we have speed limits on the roads when we drive. If you think about people who drive at extreme speeds, it is harder to do safely. And so fewer people do it safely. And the people that don't know how to do it safely typically get hurt. And even the people that do know how to do it safely still get hurt and or die, right? So when I think about rushing and I think about wanting to get things done faster and more, typically I think about what happens when somebody is speeding in a car. And part of that was actually due to a buddy of mine, Randy Keith, who has a podcast on traffic that is awesome. And I can't remember the name of the podcast right now, but if you look up Randy Keith Traffic, it's such an awesome podcast if you are a terrible, anxious, rushing driver. And that's what I was for a long time. Now, I have found myself in this space where the less that I rush, the more space that I have for things to go naturally. And I like to think about growth as like the growth of a tree, not growth that you notice daily, right? You don't really notice it day by day, but it's still there. But then like after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a few months or a year, you start to see it. And when you give things that much time to develop and grow, that's when they have an actual foundation to be able to sustain you. And that's the second part that I want to get into is the cross between sustainability and growth rate, and how when things grow too quickly, typically there's a breaking point, and that happens with our body and that happens with our workflow where there comes a point when you need to take a break. And that break can be a number of different things, and I don't really want to get into what that all can be, but just the idea that as the faster things go and the more things that are being inputted, the engine needs to cool off at a certain point, and engines blow out all the time. And so in this world where we're so rapid paced and we're just like constantly always going, it makes sense to me that people's engines, their minds or brains or bodies blow out and have emergencies, and that there's this push for mental health. I was just actually at dinner with my family, my bigger family, my siblings and my parents, wife and kids as well were there. But I was at dinner and they were talking about how depression and pharmaceuticals for depression have increased over 800% in the last 5 years. And so to me, one of the answers to that is to starting to create boundaries around technology. And I think that this is going to be a pretty massive shift in the next 10 years plus or so in how our society operates and the way that we interact with technology. As far as I'm concerned, some of the smartest minds on the subject of living a fulfilling life, those are people who I feel like are like Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, personal development types of people, but then also with a wide range of technology and science and experimentation, et cetera, talk about slowing down and being in tune with yourself. And when we're always adding more and more stuff to our plate, that is difficult to be able to do, and we end up missing a lot of our life just from not even being able to manage. And also, we're going so fast that we can tumble over ourselves and crash into the wall or something or someone. And so slowing down and calming down and regulating our nervous system and being in tune with our bodies and our minds and our thoughts and our feelings and observing our environment, observing our mind, observing our bodies and how things are flowing allows us then the opportunity to create space on our plate or in our lives for opportunities that resonate closer to the natural form of us living. I have to look at my notes because I can't remember the other thing I was going to say. Okay, right. So higher leverage priorities as far as getting a job done to me are also really a main push for how I'm trying to live my life in the idea of not necessarily like there's a few ways that I think about it, because like with farming, for instance, it's like, oh, if I could plow all these fields, and I could get all this corn, if I could do all this work with this one thing. And I think there needs to be moderation. There needs to be boundaries around what we choose to do and how we choose to use our energy, because for being fulfilled, because anything to an extreme degree isn't healthy, as we've come to find out. And when we do things to an extreme degree, we feel those consequences. And so what I mean when I say leverage is leverage to a certain degree. That means, if I'm going to make a video, let's say, all right, for an example, if I'm going to make a video, there are videos that I want to make that are going to probably take me 10 to 20, 30, maybe 40 hours, maybe more, maybe 100 or hundreds of hours to do, that probably aren't necessarily going to get me, the in front of the audience or connecting to the people that I am excited to connect with. And unless they're like really pushed, and I'm already pushing a few other pieces of an intellectual property that I don't have time to really push another one and promote another one. And so for me, focusing on the thing that's easiest to do, that's going to get me the most output right now, really makes the most sense. And it's easy to get distracted on other stuff. And so what I've made is a daily commitment or a daily practice to doing one high leverage activity per day that I know. And so you still can have time for the fun. You still can have time to do stuff that may not be necessarily business or may not necessarily bring in revenue, but is still a high leverage activity for your psyche, for your mental health, for your mindfulness, et cetera, et cetera. And so I give a ton of value to that side of things because, one, it helps me slow down, and two, it really helps me to connect with the type of work that I love to do. And so I pick one like high leverage activity that is only going to take me maybe 20 to 30 minutes a day. Then I spend other time, could be an hour, could be hours, on things that might be a little lower leverage but are fun. And that way I'm getting both things. I'm still getting massive output and I'm still getting the results that I want with a high leverage activity, and I'm still having fun. So it's a both. Like, for instance, with exercise, I like to dance, right? So I'll put on songs and I like to do weird dances, and you might see videos of me doing that. And to me, that is a fun exercise, and it can be high leverage, but it's not necessarily, it depends on the results that you're going for, right? So if I want to tone my muscles, dancing can help, but also doing reps, right, with weights could help more. And so picking that one high leverage activity for the day, and then doing things that are also fun, mixing the two together, and taking time for those high leverage, long-term goal activities to grow into something like a tree that can weather any storm. So those are some of the things that have helped me to be less stressed and more fulfilled in my life, and I hope that they help you too. Peace.